ça va reprendre. Et donc, en même temps, je voudrais vous dire que nous allons faire un petit changement dans le programme annoncé, enfin dans le programme distribué, puisque plusieurs personnes ont demandé par rapport au workshop prévu hier, qui s'intitulait Utiliser Lean Six Sigma pour gagner en efficacité et en efficience dans les call centers. Donc c'était prévu hier après-midi, ça ne s'était pas fait, donc on va le faire là maintenant. Oui. Parce que plusieurs ont fait demandé. Oui. D'accord. Donc, et c'est Madame Couture qui...
Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Feel free, if I walk away from the microphone and you can't hear me, just give me a wave and I will try to do better with that. So I'm actually going to start this presentation the same way that Jarrett did. By raise of your hand, who is familiar with Lean Six Sigma? Anybody? Okay. All right, so we will go into the agenda. So I am going to talk a little bit about what Lean Six Sigma is. This is a really complex topic, so I'm only going to scratch the surface. I'm focusing in on problem solving because I feel like in a call center, that's one of the most important components. So primarily, we're going to talk about some tools that will help around problem solving, kind of help you actually figure out what the real problem is. And some of the things we'll talk about, you've heard me say before around things that you should make sure you're doing around communication and accountability, etc. Now, if we have time, this was originally supposed to be a workshop, so we are going to be passing out an exercise. I'm going to pass it out to you even if we don't have time so that you have it. And we're going to give you some pens as well. We'll do that a little bit later in the presentation. And then we'll review keys to success, which has kind of been consistent for us in these presentations, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, so I'm going to read the standard definition, and then I'm going to read you my definition of Lean Six Sigma. So Lean Six Sigma is a method that relies on collaborative team effort to improve performance by systematically removing waste and reducing variation. So to me, it's a little complicated. Lean Six Sigma actually came to be from the manufacturing world. So I'm not going to get into the history of Lean Six Sigma, but it can be applied to any industry. And really what Lean Six Sigma is it's a process. You have to have a lot of collaboration through this process. It gives you data to be able to make decisions, which we talked about before in one of my previous presentations, how important data is. So it gives you the ability to make data-driven decisions, and it will help you identify problems and help you solve those problems. So I know it's probably still a little abstract for you, but hopefully as we go through the presentation, it'll become a little bit more clear. Okay, in an ideal world, all of you will have already gone through Lean Six Sigma training. There are different levels, and I'm actually going to explain what each level competency is in Lean Six Sigma and what you have to do to get that certification. In addition to the certification, again, in the most ideal world, your company has their own process and vision for Lean Six Sigma, and there's typically training around that. So there's the standard training, and then your company would have training as well. The other key from a foundational perspective is you need to have an on-site expert in order for this to work. Right, neat. So what I mean by that is if you are rolling this out to your company and your company has 10 offices, you're going to need an expert at each one of those offices if you want this to be successful. It's just too complex. There's too many things to remember to not have somebody there assisting you. And really, a lot of what Lean Six Sigma is change. You have to really have good change management. So this is going to be a change, most likely, from how you do business today. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about, in addition to the principles, is how do you get this incorporated into your culture. So if you'll notice the things that I've been talking about, hopefully you see some intersections, and hopefully you can build on some of the concepts that we've been talking about. Another critical component is having senior level commitment to this process. If it's done right, the company is going to see a lot of improvement, and it's going to result in an increase in revenue, better employee engagement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the front end, it's going to be a cost because there's going to have to be training done, you're going to have experts there. And when I say expert, it doesn't necessarily, at the beginning, it's probably going to need to be somebody from the outside, but you can train someone internally to become the expert so that they can stay longer term. And then, of course, communication, communication, communication. Employee engagement. Again, the only way this is going to work is if everyone in your corporation is involved. And what I mean by that is if you have a department that you really don't interact with at all on a regular basis, so therefore you don't have a great relationship with them, they have to be involved in this process as well, because some of the more complicated processes require different people from the organization to be involved in order for you to be able to solve them. So some organizations struggle with silos. So you've got maybe the sales department doesn't do a very good job of talking to the service department, who doesn't do a very good job of talking to the back end. Thank you. Let's get these to you. So the key here is the whole organization, all departments have to be involved in this. And through working with each other, then you start building those relationships and things become a lot easier to start solving problems. But understand that it has to come from the top, and every part of the company has to be engaged in this process. And then, of course, I've already mentioned this, but it's worth mentioning again, is this is a big change, so you need to follow proper change management. Okay, so let's talk about the certifications. So if you're interested in this, this is similar to, I was talking to someone, I don't remember who now, but Scrum Master certification, a PMP for a project manager. It's kind of along the same lines. Typically you have, when you very first start, you're either doing this online or in a classroom where you're learning the material, and then there's some testing. And we'll get into, as you go up in belts, there's more involved. Like you have to have experience. You have to have so many projects that you've done. So let's go ahead and just talk about it. So a yellow belt is where you start. Typically, once you get your yellow belt, you're going to understand the process. You know it, but you may not be able to apply all the pieces when you're a yellow belt. So typically a yellow belt is going to be working with a green belt or a black belt. They may be someone who contributes to a project, but they're not going to be leading a project. So this is kind of just, if you're going to do it on a school level, you're kind of in kindergarten, first grade as a yellow belt. Does that resonate? Kindergarten, first grade, beginning of school. All right. Once you're a yellow belt, you don't actually have to be a yellow belt to get your green belt. All the other ones, you have to have a previous belt. So you can actually go from nothing to a green belt. But most of the time, you'll get your yellow belt and then your green belt. So a green belt is going to work really closely with a black belt. And if you're in martial arts, you know, these belt concept probably resonates with you, but there's not that many belts. It's yellow, green, black, master black belt. All right, so typically a green belt is going to have 3 years of experience. They're going to assist more on the data side. So a lot of, at least in my opinion, a lot of the hard part of learning Lean Six Sigma is the math, the data, and the analysis that you have to learn. So a lot of practice is needed. So a green belt is going to be doing a lot of practicing with a black belt. If you haven't already caught on to this, projects are going to be categorized by belt type. So a lower level project may be able to be led by a lower level belt. So a green belt may get the opportunity to run a green belt project. Not every organization does it this way though. So what I would want you to remember is basically they can lead some projects sometimes, as long as they're not too complex. But you may be in an organization where they only want black belts to lead projects. So it really is dependent on the company. All right, a black belt is usually the most, it's probably the one that everybody wants to get. It's the coveted one. You don't see a lot of master black belts, but you see a lot of people that are going for their black belts. So just to kind of give you a feel. They do lead projects. They do a lot of training and coaching for yellow and green belts. They have a better understanding of Six Sigma. I mean, I think there's a saying, which I'm probably going to get wrong, but if you want to learn something really well, teach it, because you've got to learn it in order to be able to teach it to someone else. So I think that's kind of what the black belt does. They know it very well, and then they teach others. And then I'm not going to get into the acronym that you see there because we won't have enough time, but basically they're role modeling this process. The master black belt basically does everything that a black belt does, but they've been doing it longer, they've done more projects, and they're training the black belt level. Typically, as I mentioned, the on-site support person, you're going to want to have a master black belt at least at the organizational level. It would be great to have a master black belt at every location, but I don't know how realistic that is, but you do need a black belt at each location. Okay, so how do you get these certifications? So I kind of mentioned this earlier. Basically a yellow belt, you go to a class that can be online or in person, you take a test, you get your belt. The green belt, same thing as the yellow belt. The test clearly is a little bit harder, but you also have to have work experience going into it before you can get your green belt. And what I mean by work experience, I mean work experience doing Lean Six Sigma. Your black belt, again, these work on top of each other, so you have to have your green belt to become a black belt. There's a certain amount of time that you need to have working in Lean Six Sigma. There's a certain number of projects that you have to complete before you can get your black belt. And then the rest is the same. You take a class, it's a longer class, it's a harder class, and you have to take a test that's in more depth as well. So, kind of repeating, in the black belt, it's you have to have, the master black belt requires you to have a black belt, but you also have to take a test from the very beginning. So before you even take the course for master black belt, you have to take a course just to get into the program for them to check your level of understanding. You have to have a longer work experience than a black belt, completed more projects, and then another repeat here. You're going to take a more complicated class, take a more in-depth test. Okay, so I spoke a little bit about goals just earlier this morning. But your company, your organization really needs to have a clear expectation of what they want to get from Lean Six Sigma. Abdu mentioned, the days are kind of blurring, one of the days. He talked about in the US, we had the economy was in a downturn in the 2008, 2009 timeframe, and a lot of call centers were focused on what we called Operation Excellence, which was all about how can we be the most efficient that we possibly can be. And we need to reduce costs by X amount. So going into this, the organization needs to make a decision as to what your goal wants to be at a high level. And at the beginning, the goal may just be, I want this integrated into our culture. It may not have a fixed number. Most of the time that's not the case though, because most organizations want to have a positive ROI really quickly on any initiative. So the goal can look different, but typically there's a few goals. They want it integrated into the culture because otherwise it's not going to work. And there's some type of cost savings or revenue benefit that the company is looking for. But that needs to be set at the very top. And then what happens, you'll learn this as you go through your certification process, is you learn how to make goals that you can quantify. And there's a lot of pieces that go into helping you figure out how to quantify things. It gives you a very different perspective on looking at goals and getting results by going through this certification process and learning. Are you guys still here?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The other key, and this isn't just a Lean Six Sigma thing, but whatever the goal is, it should be visible. Up on the walls, you should be talking about it. Everybody should know what it is. In fact, part of the check process, which I'll talk about at the end of the process, the accountability process, is your associates are interviewed and they're asked what are the goals. And if they don't know, then you're going to get a low score on your 90-day plan. So again, you've heard me say this a million times so far, but communication is key as well. You need to communicate over and over again in different ways, different mediums. Okay. So Jarrett, for those of you, I don't think everybody was in here for your talk where you talked about a customer journey map, but a customer journey map is part of this process. However, I'm not going to go into the customer journey map, but at a really high level, a customer journey map is a process map. It's just at a broader level. So you'll kind of get it by what we're talking about from a process map perspective. So a process map is basically just a graphical picture of the steps of a process in general. The process map for Lean Six Sigma has everyone involved in it. So I know in a call center, typically you're thinking, how can I get the most done with the least amount of people? In order for this to work, you're going to gain efficiencies and effectiveness, but in order for this to work, everyone has to be involved in the process mapping process. And there's a different process map for each function. And I'm going to go into what that means in just a moment. I'm going to show you some different process maps. So, but just something quick before we get into it. Once you have created a process map, it should be displayed. And then there will be regular times that you're going to take all the different groups in your organization to the process map. And they're going to use stickies. I'm not sure. Stickies is probably not Post-it notes. Up on the process map to identify places where it can be improved. And I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. So it seems very elementary, but you've got this big map on the wall. Let me go ahead. So you've got something like this up on the wall. This is a very simple one. And then you take, your employees will take the Post-it note, write what they feel should be improved, and stick it where it is in the process. And this happens on a regular basis. So in my previous life, we had stand-up meetings. So we didn't have them on Mondays, but we had them on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which is our work week. Monday through Friday is our work week. And they would be 15 minutes, and actually stand-up meetings are part of the Lean Six Sigma process as well. But you can decide where you are in this process. You can decide how often to go to a process map. But at the beginning of when we put one together, each week, we would take one of those stand-up meetings. Instead of having our normal stand-up meeting, we would go to the process map. We talk about the process, we put stickies on, because you want to keep it fresh in their mind. You want them to be thinking, how can I make this process better? How can we make this a better process for the customer? All right, so let's talk about the process map. So this is really, really simple, but don't leave out any steps. That's one of the hardest parts about the process map is you've been doing it so long typically that you are thinking, oh, well, that's already in there. You have to break it down, and that's another reason why you need to have everybody there, because they hold everybody accountable on the process. When you get a little bit further down in this process, you'll have people from other organizations also weigh in on this process map. Now, they'll see it differently because their interaction with the process map is different. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So let's just walk through this. So your agent dings in their ear that a call's coming in. I don't know that they lift the receiver anymore. They probably have a headset on, but let's just pretend that they lift the receiver. Oh, okay, I apologize. I was thinking this was from an agent perspective. So this is a customer calling in. So they lift the receiver, they dial the number, it rings, then your agent either answers it and goes through that and says hello. So it has two paths. The top path is the phone is answered. If they don't answer, the customer hangs up, but we're going to go through the yes. So answer, you say hello, you have a conversation, you hang up. So very, 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 very basic. You probably will not see one this basic in a call center, but this kind of gives you an idea at a really high level. So it was hard for me to get this big enough for you to see. In fact, if we were having a workshop, I was actually going to do one live for you. But basically, I will give you a call center at a really high level process map. So I'll finish what I started to say. So your agent gets a ding in his ear, and they do the greeting. So thank you for calling MetLife. My name's Lisa Couture. How can I help you today? So your process map is going to have it rang in my ear. This is what I say, and then you're going to have one call type. So remember my CRM discussion, where a person's calling in and they just need your address. Now, hopefully you have that in the IVR, but the IVR is actually a different process now. But so we'll just do a simple one. So the customer says, after I do my greeting, I need your address. So then that would be a box. They tell you what the problem is. And then the next step is you give them the address. And then you say, is there anything else? Which is another box. And then they say, actually, why don't you go ahead and give me the phone number to your claims department while I'm on with you. So then that's another box. And then you give them the information, which is a box. Is this making sense? I don't want to keep going if you guys are following. So every step, and actually that's the phone part of it. You actually need to have a process for the system part. So what did the agent do? What system did they pull up? Maybe they didn't need a system to give the address. They may have just known that. But if it was, can you tell me what my coverage is? What system did they pull up? What did they have to key in? Every single step that they do at a granular level is part of this process map. Now you're thinking, probably, that's a lot of information to document. And typically when you do this exercise, you'd use a whole wall. Like you would use the back wall of this. Because there's all kinds of things that can happen on that phone call. Now, you do want to try to have different process maps for different products, for different call types, because otherwise you're going to have this crazy amount of data that's going to be hard to follow. The IVR process should be a completely different process map. So I feel like I'm throwing a lot at you, so let me just take a pause. Does the process map make sense? Or do I need to talk more about that? Yes, I need to talk, or no, we're good? We good? Okay. All right, so I mentioned before that employees at all levels should be involved in the process of creating the map, and they should be part of putting the problems on with the Post-it notes. Now you're probably thinking, I've got this process map on my wall with all these Post-it notes, what are we doing with all these Post-it notes? So at the end of the day, when everybody's gone to the process map, somebody will take all of the Post-its off and put it in an electronic file. And this is not just a one-time thing. This happens over and over again. But every time you go to the process map and you've got problems, and you don't actually have to have a standardized time. Your employees, they could just think of something on a day that you're not having a stand-up meeting at the process map. They just take a Post-it note and stick it on there. So it doesn't have to be a formalized time where everybody goes up there. If somebody thinks of something that could be done better, they can go up instead. So at the end of each day, you take all the Post-it notes, you put it in an electronic file, and then the management team prioritizes the problems. Because you are going to have a lot based on my experience, and you can't solve everything at once. So you take them, you prioritize them, and you prioritize them as either quick wins, so it's something that maybe you as a supervisor can solve, or it's a more complex problem, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. So, and you're going to categorize it. So if it's a more complex problem, then it's probably going to involve multiple departments. You need to have the right people in a root cause problem solving session, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But you're basing the categorization and the prioritization on real data. So it may not just be you're sitting around a table with your supervisors and managers and you take that list and you decide, okay, we should do this one first, this one second. You might actually have to do some analysis and figure out what's the impact of this particular problem. Now you're going to spend some time later in this process doing that as well, but in order to prioritize correctly, you may have to do a little bit on the front end. So here's when I was going to walk through my process map, but we're going to skip that. All right, problem solving. So I want to reiterate, I'm taking one thing out of a whole bunch of things that I could be talking about and focusing in on problem solving. There's all kinds of things around culture. There's so many things that I'm not touching on today. So just keep in mind, I'm just picking one piece of this. All right, so has anyone in this room experienced this scenario? You bring a problem to your boss and you say, we really need to get this resolved. It could either save us dollars, make our employees better, whatever the case is. And the boss says, yeah, that's a great idea. I'll look into it. And then you never hear from them again. Has that ever happened to anybody? So you go back to the boss and you say, hey, I was just checking on that problem that I brought to you. And the boss says, oh yeah, I'm still looking into that. Has that ever happened to you? And then you kind of give up, usually, after that. And you're thinking, well, nothing's ever going to happen with my ideas, so why should I ever bring it? That is the complete opposite of this process. The whole idea is to get people's feedback and for you to follow up with them. Now that doesn't mean that you're going to solve every single problem on that process map, because that's impossible. The key is communicating the status of all of these problems. And it could be, hey, that's still on the priority list, we're working on these 3. And you're going to have it posted So it's not even like a file that's in the manager's computer. It is a list that is on the wall where everybody can walk around and say, oh, here are the problems that we have prioritized. So they can ask you, but they can just go to the wall and look at it and see where it is in the process. So communication and transparency, again, I've talked about that before, is critical in Lean Six Sigma. The process map, though, is not the only place that you get problems. So that scenario that I just shared with you, somebody could just come up to you and say, hey, I'm having this problem. And it's not on the process map. So you add that to the same list. All of the problems should be in one centralized place. Even if they didn't come from the process map, all the problems are listed in the same place. Typically, what happens is a frontline supervisor gets the problem first. If they can solve it, great. It's a quick win. You want to communicate the quick win. Everybody knows that their voice is being heard. If they give a suggestion, it's at least going to be considered. But if it's not that simple, then the next step is for the supervisor to take it to the manager. And it's the same process. If the manager can handle it and take care of it, and it's within the prioritization, because remember, we're already working on some problems, then they'll solve it, communicate it, be transparent. If not, and it's a more complex, then we go down the root cause problem solving path, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Otherwise, it goes on the list and gets prioritized with everything else. All right, root cause problem solving sessions. It's another weird term, I guess, but basically all it means is you're taking really complex problems, you're getting all the right people in a room, and you go through a process to solve whatever problem that you're working on. So you've got your priority of problems, you've picked the one that you think is going to be the most impactful, and then you set up a meeting with the right people. And they need to be, when I say right, I mean the people that can make the decisions. So think back to the beginning of my presentation. Why do you think it's important to have senior level commitment on this? I don't know about you, but I've tried to set up meetings with senior leaders and I can't get on their calendar. So in order for everybody in the organization, for this to work, everybody in the organization has to be willing to attend these meetings where appropriate. Now that doesn't mean the CEO is going to be involved in every single root cause problem solving session. It's only the people that are needed, the people that need to make the decision. And also the stakeholders. So I mentioned early on that you've got to have everybody involved in the process map, including people that don't do that particular work, but they support it. So having those additional people in this meeting is important because they have a different insight and something maybe that you didn't think of, that this, maybe the path, the solution that you've come up with may break something else. So you need to have the right people in the room, both that are decision makers and also that represent other parts of the company so that the decision that you're making is the right one. And the steps and solutions that you're making are the right ones. You need to have somebody in there who is an expert at leading root cause problem solving. And typically that's going to be a black belt, but it doesn't have to be. It's just somebody who's trained in doing this. And in every root cause problem solving session, you want to have people at different levels. So if it's an associate that brought this problem to you, you probably need to have an associate in the meeting, which that's not typical for a call center. We don't want them off the phones for any reason, basically, as much as we can. But in this process, it's important to get their point of view because, again, they may know something that you don't, so they need to be in there. I really wanted to show you a video. I really wanted to show it to you. But because of the connection problems in here, I'm not even going to try it. But please watch this video. It's on YouTube. It is an excellent, excellent, excellent example of explaining the 5 whys. So I'm going to do it verbally, but I'm not going to do it justice. Whenever you go into a root cause problem solving session, you think you know the problem that you're trying to resolve. But most of the time, what you think the problem is doesn't actually end up being the problem. The 5 whys basically is a practice that every time you're trying to solve a problem, you ask why 5 times. So here's what the video is about. So there's a monument in Washington, D.C. that was falling apart, basically. And a group of people got together and they're like, we want this monument to stay intact. So why is it falling apart? So that was the first why. So they discovered that the monument was having to be power washed every night because of bird droppings. There were a lot of people that were coming to visit this monument. They wanted it to look nice, so they were power washing the monument. So first why was, why is it falling apart? The second one was the power washing. So then the question was, well, why are so many birds coming to this monument? And the answer was, because there's all these insects there that they're eating that happen to be in this monument. So then the question was, well, why are all these insects coming to this monument? And the answer was, they have lights shining on this monument all the time. So the problem that really needed to be solved is, how are we going to deal with this lighting? But that's not what the original thought was for the problem. So this is just a process. And when you're in a root cause problem solving session, the leader is going to ask the group why at least 5 times to make sure that you're solving the right problem. So that's kind of the principle. The video does it much better than what I just did, but that's the gist of it. Because if you don't know what problem you're solving, how could you ever come up with the right solution? So once you come up with a problem statement, and if we have time, I'm going to be asking you guys to put a problem statement together. You want to make sure that in the problem statement that you're describing in detail what the problem is. And typically you want to have some numbers in there because you need to be able to measure. And then of course you're going to measure and track. All right, so let's dive into the problem statement. I'm going to go and show you some examples of some problem statements. But anybody heard of SMART when you're establishing goals? Anybody heard of SMART? Okay. So SMART stands for, when you're writing a goal or a problem statement, you want to be specific about what the problem is. It needs to be measurable. So again, we're talking about the numbers that I just mentioned. Attainable, realistic, and there needs to be a time-bound piece to what you're putting together. So I'm actually going to read the definition. So a problem statement is a concise description of an issue to be addressed or a condition to be improved upon. It identifies the gap between the current problem, this is key, we usually mess up here. It identifies the gap between the current problem and the desired state or the goal. So you want to have both of those in there. Where are you at now and where do you want to be? All right, this is probably hard to read. And I'm giving you some examples, but they're not all perfect examples, but you'll at least get the gist of it. So Acme Corporation has 20 enterprise systems, many with overlapping functionality and workloads. There are numerous fragile data connections between systems, yet the organization has no real master data management in place. Usability of several systems is poor, and user adoption of systems has been challenging. Acme is struggling with information chaos. So what I like about this one is it does a great job of describing the problem. What I don't like about this one is it doesn't do a very good job of telling us what the ideal state is and how we're going to measure whether or not we made it from here to here. I mean, you can do some inference, but I think the problem statement would probably be clearer. All right, here's some other ones. So the first one is Scrap in the binder business is running at 3% versus a plan of 2.7. So I like it because it has numbers in it. I'm a numbers girl. I love goals. I love measures. So to tie to that, here's some more to it. Overproduction has increased red tag over 110,000 binders since 2008, January of 2008, and will continue since there are no controls to prevent it. And then the result, the overproduction related scrap is estimated at $150,000 annually and is needed, and it's using needed capacity. So not only are we losing money because of the product that's in scrap, but we're also using resources, so it's even more money. So I like this example better just because it gives you a good picture of what's going on and has the numbers to back it up. Now this one also doesn't necessarily put a goal to where we want to get it. Do you want to eliminate it altogether? Do you want to improve it by 50%? So just things to think about when it comes to a problem statement. You want to explain current state, but you also want to explain where you want to get it. All right, we'll do one more. So month-end close is consistently requiring more than 240 work hours per month in our department and is completed 2 to 3 days late. What's that? Can you guys still hear? Okay. Sorry, I don't know where I stopped, so I'm going to start over. Month-end close is consistently requiring more than 240 work hours per month in our department and is completed 2 to 3 days late, more than 20% of the time. Business needs require that we reliably complete month-end on time for reporting purposes, create capacity for approximately 120 FTE hours per month towards analysis to support improvement. This one tells me where I want to go. So is that making sense to everybody? Problem statement is supposed to say where you're at, you need to try to quantify it, where you want to go, and try to quantify it. So you can measure if all of your efforts actually paid off. And you can prove to senior leadership that it was worth you spending the time on this particular project. All right, I'm going to give you a couple of real life examples from my experience. So we actually created a new website at MetLife, and the purpose, well, let me rephrase. It wasn't a new website, it was new functionality on the website. And we provided functionality to be able to quote auto insurance online. So we created it, but if anything went wrong in the process, so if they had a ticket on their driving record, so they were going too fast, or if they were in an accident, or they had a glass claim, if anything happened to where it wasn't a perfect quote, they would get a message that said, I can't complete this quote. But it would not give them any other course of action. Like, what were they supposed to do then? It didn't say that. It just basically said, you can't get a quote. So what would happen, there was no phone number there. So what would happen is the customer would Google MetLife and just get a phone number for MetLife. And they would get transferred everywhere, and finally they'd end up in the call center. Not very happy, mind you, because the reason why they typically were trying this was because we marketed it. Like, hey, we have this new functionality, go check it out. We should have waited until we got the bugs out. So there were a couple of challenges in solving this problem. So basically agents were coming, it got up to me through the channel, but agents were like, we're getting these customers that are really frustrated on the website because when they get in there, they can't get a quote and there's no course of action on the website. Can't we at least put a phone number? So the process in place, because there was some technical expertise that needed, it wasn't just a standard phone call. There were like 2 people that were trained to help a customer navigate through this. So when our call center agent got the information, they would transfer it to this group. But there's only 2 people. We're having all these people call into the call center. They're already mad because they had to be routed everywhere to get to us to even get the answer. And then we had to transfer them to people that couldn't handle the volume. So there was a technology piece that had to be fixed because we couldn't just, as a call center, just say, hey, you need to at least add a phone number until we get more staff. So it was a very complex problem where we had to meet with IT folks to get us a technical solution. We had to train more people to be able to handle the volume. That's just an example of how we had to pull in different groups to solve a problem that in reality we created ourselves. And I think a lot of times the problems that we get into in call centers are problems that we create ourselves as a company. But that shouldn't deter you from trying to solve problems. But for time reasons, I'm not going to go through the other two examples, but in essence, the manual app process was a manual process that we had to engage other groups in because of budgeting, etc. And then the last one was a voice signature. So there were many forms that needed to be signed, and there was a problem with getting to the customer and getting a fax back, and could we accept email? And so that was a technology fix that we put in where if the person verbally gave us the okay, then you could take that. But there was a cost associated with that technology. So. All right, so if you can pass out, so we're going to pass out the exercise. We don't have time to do the exercise, but I'm going to walk through it real quick. So we're going to give you a couple of pins and this exercise. And I'm not going to wait until you get it. I'm going to go ahead and start going through the exercise. So the first exercise actually, and practice mapping it out. I would encourage you to still do this on your own. And I would be happy to take a look at it. If you guys want to scan it and email it to me, I'm happy to give you feedback on it. You can Google process maps to see some more examples. But really, I just want you to get a feel for what a process map is and how you incorporate it into your organization. The next few exercises are really around the problem statement and how to create one for your own organization. So the first one was think of a problem that you have in your organization. I'm sure you can think of many problems. Then I was going to have you partner with someone and brainstorm using the 5 whys on what the actual problem is. Then I was going to have you guys write out the problem statement. Then we were going to have you first review it with a partner so you could get feedback. Then we were going to do some examples together so you can get an idea. I know we had enough of those, right? Jared, everybody get 2 minutes. But are they getting one from each? I want to get them. All right. So moving into communication. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. The one I'm going to focus on, since I haven't really focused actually two, is crucial conversations. There's a book that I read, and I don't remember the title of it. I'll have to send it to you guys. But I've been in people management for over 20 years, so I've had a lot of practice with crucial conversations. I think if you are in management in a call center, you probably have seen just about everything and had to have conversations about just about everything. For some people, it comes more naturally than others. And we actually read this book as the phrase just went out of my head. We studied it together as a leadership team. So everybody would read a chapter, we get together and discuss it. Why can't I think what those are called? Book something. Well, I think you get my drift. And most of it actually, you can apply it either professionally or personally, and I'll tell them myself. Professionally, I could pretty much have a conversation with anyone about anything. I mean, really. Just because I've done it so much and I've developed the skills. I have a much harder time having crucial conversations with my husband. And I think it's just because I have learned to keep my professional conversations professional and on a certain zone. When I have conversations with my husband, there's an emotional connection. And it's way harder for me to communicate. In fact, if I'm an A+ communicating in my professional life, which I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I'm pretty good at having crucial conversations. I give myself a 1 in having crucial conversations with my husband. I mean, it's that much of a difference. So for me, this book, when I read it, and I actually own it and read it on a regular basis because it's one of those things where I need to be reminded. It's an excellent book. I recommend it to all of you. It will help you train your staff on how to have crucial conversations. But anyway, change is hard for people. And there are going to be decisions as you go through this process that people might not like. So it's important that your staff is able to have crucial conversations. And the other critical point on the communication is follow-up. You may not have an answer, but you need to continuously follow up with your staff so that they know what's going on. You can make huge strides in this process, and if you don't communicate, you're basically going to start right back at the beginning. The other thing that you've heard me say over and over again is to have visuals on the walls. So your goals need to be posted, your problems need to be posted, your progress needs to be posted. Every time a problem is solved, that needs to be communicated. I am running short on time, so I'm going to make this quick. In the Lean Six Sigma process, every 90 days you have a plan, and you basically are tested. So there's a group of people from all over the organization that are trained to come in and test your department. And there are certain categories, I'm not going to get into that, but there are certain categories that they're looking for. And again, I've only scratched the surface on Lean Six Sigma, so it wouldn't even make sense to you if I went through all of them. But you put a plan together, you're tested on where you are in the Lean Six Sigma process, and you're tested on the results of your plan. And that happens every 90 days. So again, going back to the senior level involvement, people have to travel to do this, and they are skilled people. So every 90 days, in every department, you have this check. And it's really important for the process. It keeps you moving. This is not something that you turn the light switch on and all of a sudden your department has arrived in this model. It is a continuous process of years and years and years. And the goal is just to stay in an upward trajectory. And in order to do that, you have to have a plan, and you have to be held accountable to it. I'm not going to go into that. So in review here, you need to have the proper Lean Six Sigma training in order for this to work for you. I personally believe you also have to have internal training as well, so that it becomes more company specific. That top level buy-in is critical. You're not going to be able to do this without it. The communication, the inclusion of employees, making sure that you're bringing in all of the key stakeholders, and make sure that you're applying all of the change management pieces that have worked for you in the past, and then have proper tracking. Okay, that was a lot, and I didn't get to everything that I wanted to. But really what I want you to take away from this, if nothing else, is that there is a process out there that can help you become more efficient and effective. It doesn't happen overnight. And having this certification will set you apart, both individually and as an organization. So let me put this on and we'll open it up for questions. Any questions? a lot of information. Anybody? Do you have a question? Okay. All right, well, I'm not going to force you to ask questions, but I will be here. If you guys have any questions, or if you want to practice any of your exercises and then run it by me in person, open to that. Here's my information. Actually, it doesn't have my email address, so come and ask me for a card. That's our website. You can get us through the contact form, but I have many business cards, so I'm happy to give you one if you want to contact me for any reason. All right. Thank you. I think it's actually time for lunch, isn't it? Okay, great. Well, it's time for lunch. That's why I didn't ask you.